daughter has been charged with this crime. Mervinia Lowe was found dead in her apartment in Pleasant Ridge early. Nicole Flagg, the victim's 41-year-old daughter. She has now been arrested on a charge of aggravated murder in connection with the death of her mother.
Friends, today we have a story coming from Ohio. I promise you've probably never heard this story before. How much do you love your mother, and at what end are you willing to protect her? Today's story will look at Nicole Flagg, the worst of daughters. In the heart of Cincinnati, tucked away in the Pleasant Ridge neighborhood, lay a mystery of chilling proportions. The protagonist, Nicole Flagg, a woman whose life was ensnared in the deadly clutches of drug addiction. Her life story took a chilling turn one April afternoon in 2015 in her mother's apartment. Flagg's half-brother, Maurice Allen, his life had always been uneventful and steady, in part due to his humble upbringing and reserved personality. He held a regular 9-to-5 job in Columbus, chatted with his mother, Mervinia Lowe, each day without fail, and his heart held a unique space for his hometown, Cincinnati. Mervinia, a passionate and hardworking woman, devoted most of her time serving at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center, juggling between her job and household chores, doing everything in her power to provide a comfortable life for her family. She was the embodiment of strength and resilience, and inspiration for many. Maurice's life until then quite ordinary, but he was about to be plunged into the depth of a mystery that would shake the very foundations of his existence. Maurice Allen used to be in frequent communication with his mother despite living in Columbus, but their life was about to change forever, and it all started with Maurice Allen's growing suspicions about his mother, Mervinia Lowe. The saga began when Maurice was unable to get in touch with his mother over phone. He tried calling several times, but to his dismay, he did not get an answer. He tried both her home and cell phone, only to be greeted with an odd answering machine message. On this answering machine, it was a weird rap song. Maurice's heart skipped a beat as he listened to this bizarre song, a stark contrast to his mother's usual professional greeting. Something was wrong. Why is there a rap song on my mother's voicemail? What is going on? It wasn't easy living with such doubt, especially because the subject of the uncertainty was his mother. His suspicion grew when he remembered his half-sister, Nicole Flagg, was a woman with a dubious past, riddled with involvements in criminal activities, including manslaughter and robbery. I also think it's interesting how his first instinct was to think, does my sister have something to do with this? Says a lot about the sister, right? As time went on, his mother was nowhere to be found, so he alerted the Cincinnati police, his voice cracking with fear and confusion. When the Cincinnati police arrived at Mervinia's Pleasant Ridge home, they found it unusually lively. There was music blaring from the speakers, and the lights flickering in a sinister manner sent chills down their spines. No one answered when they knocked. The eeriness grew unbearable until they took the bold step of entering through a window. Inside, they discovered a ghastly sight that would haunt them forever. Upon entering, they were hit by a strong odor of bleach. There, lying between the kitchen and the dining room, was Mervinia Lowe's lifeless body, doused in bleach with 12 fatal stab wounds. 12 stab wounds. Remember that. I'll come back to that. But the mystery only deepened. Lowe's cell phone was missing, and it later emerged as the centerpiece of a deadly trade. Maurice's world crumbled as he learned about the gruesome fate that had befallen his mother. The apartment was in a state of disarray, suggesting a possible robbery attempt. Maurice's worst fears came true. His mother, the woman he cherished, was no more. Police immediately swung into action, hunting for clues and interrogated people of interest. Among the first to be questioned was Nicole Flagg, which is normal. Police always ask questions of the ones closest to the victim first. Despite her pleading innocence, the evidence pointed towards her involvement. Her past crimes painted a grim picture, one that wasn't easy to ignore. Flagg had been involved in a similar crime 12 years before. Imagine that. Imagine getting 2 murder convictions or 2 murder accusations in one life. Huh? Previously, this incident resulted in the shooting death of a man in his apartment in Corryville and had sentenced Nicole to an 8-year involuntary manslaughter and robbery charge. Alongside her husband and another accomplice, she orchestrated a robbery that culminated in the tragic demise of Jeffrey Brown, a beloved uncle just 42 years old. The events that transpired that fateful day paint a grim picture. Flagg, with sinister intent, granted the perpetrators access to Jeffrey Brown's Corryville apartment. Within those walls, the echoes of a heart wrenching act resounded as bullets pierced the air, claiming the life of an innocent man. The Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office unveiled a disconcerting truth. Flagg had struck a plea deal concerning her involvement with Jeffrey Brown's murder in 2003. In a shocking admission, she confessed to aggravated robbery and involuntary manslaughter, leading to a sentence of a mere 8 years behind bars. So, when the police in this case, with the case of their mother, questions her, she says, "No, I'm innocent." Well, duh, of course they're gonna accuse you. You've murdered before, you moron. Could it be a mere coincidence that her sudden reappearance in Cincinnati coincided with her mother's mysterious death, or was she weaving a new web of deceit? A shroud of suspicion, fear, anticipation descended upon the city as the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office dug deeper into the case. As the citizens waited with bated breath, they wondered if justice would be served for Movinia, the gentle soul who had dedicated her life to the well being of others. The story of the Pleasant Ridge home was far from over, as the walls echoed with secrets, lies, and hidden truths. Every passing day brought a new revelation, adding layers to the mystery that was once an ordinary family. So the question remains, what happened to Movinia? Well, let's get into the trial. During the trial, the evidence stacked against Flagg was damning. Stolen items from Movinia's home, a changed voicemail, Flagg's past convictions, and the questionable timing of her return were all in the police's minds. Nicole, of course, denied any wrongdoing. She even expressed surprise at the rap music on her mother's voicemail and said, "Yeah, that's kind of strange." But the evidence was mounting against her. Video footage and phone records contradicted her alibi, and when confronted with these inconsistencies, she became defensive. The last piece of damning evidence came in the form of a paper towel shaped like a doorknob. It had Nicole's DNA on it, found in her mother's apartment. It seems as though Nicole used it to avoid leaving fingerprints. Maurice himself was thrust into a world of courtrooms and lawyers as Nicole was charged with the murder of their mother. The dreadful scenes replayed in his mind as he listened to the attorneys wrangle over legal jargon, and it all felt foreign to him. The magnitude of the allegations was staggering: aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, tampering with evidence, and gross abuse of a corpse. It was a torrent of heinous crimes that struck like a freight train, suffocating him with the realization that his sister was now accused of killing his mother. As the trial unfolded, Maurice could barely comprehend the complex legal arguments put forth by Nicole's defense team. Their adamant insistence on her innocence clashed harshly against the seemingly overwhelming evidence. Maurice found himself submerged in a whirlpool of emotions as he listened to testimony. The image of their mother's apartment, her body doused in bleach, and the crime scene smeared with evidence of a violent struggle was seared into his mind, grappling with the impossible question: could his sister, Nicole, driven by her insatiable addiction, have actually robbed and murdered their mother in cold blood to feed her drug addiction? So, the question remained, what happened to Movinia? Check this out. As I mentioned, she had been stabbed 12 times. Her defensive wounds a testament to a bitter fight for survival. The theft of Lowe's phone became the red thread that investigators followed back to Flagg. A digital breadcrumb trail led to Flagg's drug dealer, Matthew Barwick, who testified that Flagg had traded her mother's phone for drugs. So, first of all, being stabbed 12 times. A random person who's trying to rob you is not going to stab you 12 times. He's going to stab you once, twice, 3 times and take what he needs to. Why? Because there's no emotion. To stab someone 12 times, there's emotion involved. This was more than just a robbery for Flag. Initially, yeah, I'm gonna go steal money from my mum, stab her once, stab her twice, stab her 3 times. It's all bad, of course. But each incision after that, you know there's trauma, memories, or whatever pain she felt towards her mother that was being released. At the end of this twisted path lay Candy Loudermilk's house, where Flag ended up carrying a suspicious trash bag close to her. She stayed there for weeks, emerging only to move into her own apartment. The forensic evidence painted an even more damning picture of the events. A paper towel showing Flag's DNA, her black socks marred by bleach stains found in her new apartment, cellular phone analysis that corroborated Barwick's testimony, placing her at the scene until minutes after the murder. The phone records painted a digital picture that contradicted Flag's alibi and incriminated her further. Following this, the evidence came under scrutiny. At the scene of the crime, the police had discovered 4 kitchen knives and a folding knife from a separate location. Flag objected to the admission of this other weapons evidence, arguing that they had not been used in the crime. She cited a precedent, a case in which the Supreme Court held that a set of unrelated knives found in the defendant's home was an example of plain error. But Flag's situation was distinct. The kitchen knives in question were found at the crime scene and not in an unrelated location. The prosecutor had openly acknowledged to the jury that these knives were admitted to exhibit the depth of the police investigation, not to paint Flag as a violent individual. Thus, the court ruled that there was no error in admitting the knives into evidence. The folding knife, on the other hand, was found with fibers matching the shirt of the victim, potentially pointing towards its involvement in the crime. Evidence suggested that the murder occurred between 3 p.m. on a fateful Friday. Flag admitted to being at the victim's apartment until shortly after 1 p.m. A flurry of phone calls to a certain Barwick began around 1:30 p.m., and by her own admission, she had met him outside the victim's apartment between 2 p.m. and 2:30 p.m. and handed him the victim's phone in exchange for drugs. So this silly cow murdered her mother so she could take her phone or something of value and go and get drugs. Yes, addiction is a real thing, but so is being a fucking idiot. A critical piece of evidence, a paper towel most likely used to open the apartment, bore Flag's DNA. Despite Flag's allegations that her half brother Alan was the actual killer, the jury's verdict leaned in her disfavor. The evidence supported the theory that Flag was at the crime scene at 2:12 p.m., while Alan had a solid alibi, clocking into work at 1:56 p.m. It's crucial to understand the context in which Flag's defense operated. They contended with an intricate web of allegations, multiple trials, and a contentious appeals process. Their task was to navigate the nuances of double jeopardy, carefully assess the admissibility of weapon evidence, dissect the weight of evidence used for conviction, evaluate the validity of assigning separate offenses to actions considered to be of similar import, and finally judge the effectiveness of representation at trial. Regarding double jeopardy, Flagg's defense contended that her second trial had violated this constitutional provision. However, their argument did not prove sufficient. The conduct leading to the mistrial, the court found, wasn't deliberately provoked to induce the defense to seek a mistrial. There was no evidence in the record indicating that the trial court intentionally caused the mistrial. The court was merely addressing potential future problems related to the defense counsel's opening argument. Next came the examination of the evidence's sufficiency and weight, an element crucial in determining Flagg's guilt. Flagg did not dispute that a robbery and murder had taken place, nor did she deny the desecration of the victim's body and tampering of the crime scene. Her disagreement was with the state's claim that she was the perpetrator. Flagg's defense disputed whether the state had sufficiently proven Flagg to be the perpetrator of the crime. However, the jury found that there was enough evidence to establish her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, including her presence at the crime scene. Her activities immediately followed the estimated time of the murder, and her DNA found on the paper towel most likely used to open the door. The defense also asserted that the aggravated murder and aggravated robbery charges should have been merged at sentencing. Nevertheless, the court concluded that the specific intent required to prove aggravated murder showed a separate malice from the robbery offense, and thus these offenses were distinct and did not need to be merged. Lastly, on the issue of effective representation at trial, Flagg's defense alleged that they did not adequately serve her interests. However, given the court's previous judgments on the matters her counsel allegedly mishandled, the claim of ineffective assistance did not stand. The counsel's actions were determined to meet a reasonable standard of representation, thus quashing Flagg's contention. With the final arguments from the defense overruled, the trial court's initial judge was upheld, affirming the path that the defense took in handling this complex layered case. After a nail-biting courtroom drama, the jury delivered their verdict. Nicole Flagg was found guilty on multiple charges, including aggravated murder and gross abuse of a corpse. Nicole received a sentence verdict that condemned her to spend the rest of her life behind bars without any chance of parole, and the court imposed an additional term of 15 years. She sat silent in the courtroom as the final verdict was pronounced, her eyes flicking toward the jury with a silent plea, but their faces were firm, resolute in their decision. She was a crack addict, a thief, they'd been told, and now a convicted murderer. They found no room for doubt, no margin for error. Despite the verdict, Flagg still maintained her innocence. Even as the deputies led her out of the courtroom, she continued to declare, "I did not murder my mother." She urged the public to call a provided phone number with information that could help prove her innocence. Was that the number to her crack dealer? One idiot. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. The court saw no reason to believe her, and the past crimes didn't paint a reliable picture either. Her story remained a mystery for some, her incomprehensible motives making her the talk of the town. So, to conclude on this story, the motive is pretty straightforward. I'm not trying to downplay what happened, but you have someone who is suffering from addiction. They needed to satisfy that addiction, so they needed something of monetary value to get the substance in question. It's just, it turned out that she decided to murder her mother, which does talk about the level of her addiction. But as I said, how does one person have two murder charges in one life on separate occasions? Like, if you murder 3 or 4 people and you get 5 life sentences, okay, it's happened. But 2 murder charges at separate times in your life, having already served one, I don't think I've ever heard that before. That's insane. And I personally don't give a shit on what reasons she has on why she became addicted to drugs. There had to have been a life event that made her go down that path. I do not give 2 flying motherfucks. You never, ever harm your mother. To me, my mother would be the keys to heaven. I mean, I'm not addicted to anything, but let's just say I needed money to pay for a new hairline, and I decided, well, mom, I'm going to take it from her. I'm going to steal it from her. Like, what the fuck? Okay, that was a callous joke, but you understand what I'm saying, right? Like, it's just so stupid. Life sentence was the correct decision. May she never be released. Thank you for watching.
Details tonight, a woman accused of murdering her mother had been convicted in another killing 12 years ago. Tonight, Nicole Flagg is locked up on $1 million bond. WLWT News 5's Tammy Mutasa spoke with the victim's son and the family of the first victim. Tammy.
Mike, Mervinia Lowe's son is still in shock. His sister is accused of killing their mother. And tonight, another family wants to make sure she never gets out of jail.
She should never, ever be allowed on the streets ever again in life.
Nicole Flagg has not been convicted of killing her own mom, Mervinia Lowe, on April 10th. But Shamez Brown is already convinced. 12 years ago, Flagg admitted she helped 2 men rob and kill Brown's uncle, Jeffrey.
We are clearly broken without him here. He was a piece of the puzzle that kept our family together. So I think justice really needs to be served the proper way this time.
Police say Flagg murdered her mom while trying to rob her.
Devastated, angry. She took the best person in the world.
Lowe's son, Maurice Allen, called 911 after he hadn't heard from her.
Now all of a sudden, when I call her home, it's a recording of kids rapping. Teenagers rapping. There's no teenagers in her household. I'm very, very concerned.
I talked to the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office this afternoon. A spokesman says Flagg struck a plea deal in Brown's murder in 2003. She admitted to aggravated robbery and involuntary manslaughter. Her sentence, 8 years.
A nutcase like that should never be allowed out. 10 years for my uncle clearly was not enough. You get more than that robbing a bank.
Today, WLWT was there when investigators searched Flagg's apartment for evidence.
I don't understand. I can't wrap my mind around it right now.